The Baldoon settlement along the shore of the Shanelly Cart, separating the mainland from Walpole Island, was brought about by Thomas Douglas, 5th Earl of Selkirk, who provided an opportunity for poor Scottish farmers and peasants who had been evicted by landowners to come to the New World to build better lives for themselves. It should be noted that prior to 1849, the 10 townships of Lambton were still a part of the Kent district. Lambton did not become a county until 20 years later. In 1829, a Sombra Township schoolmaster, Robert E. Barker, was charged with pretending to exercise witchcraft in Baldoon, a charge which remained in Ontario statutes until at least the mid-1960s. Apparently, a noisy spirit visited the Baldoon settlement that year on the 31st of October, All Hallows Eve. That night, many of the houses seemed to suddenly have been invaded by strange spirits. Objects began to move about on their own. Items disappeared and reappeared. The sheep behaved strangely. Small fires broke out with no apparent cause. The MacDonald house, people could be heard marching through the kitchen in the middle of the night, but nothing was ever visible. Stones flew through their windows until every window in the house had been broken. But they could not see anyone. Mr. Robert E. Barker, a teacher from Sombra Township, came to the Baldoon home of Mr. John MacDonald with the purpose of putting a stop to all this mischief and mayhem. The Sombra schoolteacher said that he could combat witches by nailing a horseshoe up over a door with a sealed letter behind it. This was tried, and over the next few days the letter was found in different parts of the yard. Each time Barker would add more words, reseal the letter, and rehang it over the door. Eventually, the locals began to believe that Barker was responsible for the unnatural happenings. At one point, John MacDonald walked with Barker. He said that Barker claimed that a few weeks previous, he'd met 2 people who claimed to be spirits. Barker told him that these 2 spirits had informed him that they were from the old country, were distant relatives of the MacDonalds, and had a message for John MacDonald about an estate that he was entitled to back in Scotland. Mr. Barker stated publicly that any witchcraft being practiced was by 2 women in the settlement. After Barker was arrested, a man coming to visit MacDonald was hit in the chest by a stone. He picked up the stone and threw it out into the nearby river. Minutes later, the same stone mysteriously dropped at his feet. Then a fire without cause in the house and on top of the roof. When the man told John MacDonald about a woman gifted with the ability of stone reading, he visited her. She asked if he'd ever seen an unusual bird around their home, and he remembered a goose with a black head. The woman told him to make a bullet out of silver and shoot the bird with it. If he could wound the bird, their enemy would be wounded also. He made a silver bullet, which he always kept ready. Then one morning, a few days later, while he was out tending his sheep, he saw a flock of geese. One of them had a black head. He loaded his gun with the silver bullet and shot the bird, breaking its wing. When he went later to the house of the old woman, he saw her seated on her front porch in a rocking chair with a broken arm. From that day forward, no more unusual happenings occurred at any of the homes in Baldoon, and no one ever saw the old woman again. Back to Robert Barker. The jury found him guilty of pretending to exercise witchcraft. Barker was sentenced to 1 year in jail and to stand in the pillory on the last day of each quarter and to give surety for his good behavior. The presiding officer doubted the wisdom of the jury and recommended clemency. I don't know if Robert E. Barker, a schoolmaster from Sombra, served time or was released. This is where the story ends, with no reported resolution. Maybe that's the way a story about spirits should end, with no earthly resolution.